I can never tell. Oh, there I'm live. I can never tell in the beginning. It says going live, and I don't know if I'm really live then or not. But now I'm live. Hello. How's everybody? It is Saturday afternoon, July 11th, 2020. I am on Block Island. I am Kristen. I'm the library director for the Island Free Library on Block Island. I'm in the library now. I'm in the upper level. I am presenting to you Frankenstein Tea, which is a daily program I do through the library. It is a short story program for adult listeners, always adult listeners. It is not G-rated by any means. These are adult stories, adult topics, adult themes, adult language. And, I do this program every day at 3. Wait, that's not true. I do this program every day. It's usually live at 3. Today I'm live and it is 1:17. We're open outside. Our outside library service is going on today, Saturday, and it's a little quiet right now. So I wanted to get this out there. I didn't want to miss my chance to film a story for you today. And it'll be posted at 3. So if I didn't tell you, it would probably feel like I'm live at 3, but I always feel funky about that. I want to tell you, no, it's not live. Here I am at 1:17 still. And then that gives me a chance to close up our outdoor library service with the staff and wrap up the week with them. So forgive me, but it is good intentioned that I'm filming a little bit early, not too early, but a little bit. And, so I do this program every day and it's usually live and it's always an adult short story. And it's always a chance for me to check in with you out there and for you to see, hear me, hear from the library, see the library behind me, that sort of stuff. And I read a story yesterday that I loved at the end, and I heard from my dad. He also thought it was a great story. But, it was a little tough, right? And I read some stories today. There's some really great stories that I just found today, and a few of them. One is particularly long. I'm not up for it on a Saturday afternoon. Maybe some rainy day. We'll get to that one. I like to stockpile stories. I like to have some in my quiver, shall we say. And then I read another one, which is highly recommended, a James Baldwin short story, but it is tough. It was tough. And I'm not even sure how to read it to you because some of that language I prefer not to use. When it's used only a little bit in a story, I sort of edit it. But this was consistently used throughout the story. And I began to feel funny about editing James Baldwin's work. And then I'm funny about using that language. And so I'm going to research that a little, like how to proceed in that. So I'm not reading that. And plus it was a tough story, not a beautiful sunny afternoon Block Island story by any means. Important, and we'll get to it. And I'll figure out how to present it in a way that's manageable for myself as the reader and for yourself as the listener, and appropriate. Manageable and appropriate to listen and read. So then I was like, what am I going to read? And I came across a couple of references to a Truman Capote story about Marilyn Monroe called A Beautiful Child. And that's also in the quiver. That is in the hopper. I'd like to read that story to you someday. But it's actually a little bit like a play. So I'm hoping I can get someone to read that with me. Hint, hint, Mr. Trotson, if you're listening. That's a big hint to my pal there. And so that brought me to Capote, and I'm going to do a Capote story for you today. So that's for you, Mom. I know you love them. I hope you can catch it. I read this story and put it in the quiver quite a while ago to myself. I haven't read it to you yet. And I came across it today as I was looking and thought, I didn't do this one. And I liked this one. So, gosh, don't think I did this one. I think I did one from this book. I did the one about the mink, right? The woman who goes to buy the mink. No, the woman is wealthy and she has the other woman come to her apartment to buy the mink. I think that's the Capotes. And I've read a few stories about minks, which I find interesting. It's that's a real indicator of time, isn't it? Right? That people wore minks and coveted them and thought about them and loved them and were enamored with their minks. I've read a few stories like that, but I don't think I've read this one. And if I have, sit back and enjoy for a second time. This is I'm reading today from the Complete Stories of Truman Capote, which is not the complete stories because I don't have the story I want to read, so I'm not sure what that means. It has an introduction by Reynolds Price. It was published by Random House, New York, and it was published in 2004. I'm reading a Truman Capote story from 1943. The title of this story is The Walls Are Cold. So Grant just said to them, "Come on along to a wonderful party." And, well, it was as easy as that. Really, I think it was just genius to pick them up. God only knows they might resurrect us from the grave. The girl who was talking tapped her cigarette ash on the Persian throw rug and looked apologetically at her hostess. The hostess straightened her trim black dress and pursed her lips nervously. She was very young and small and perfect. Her face was pale and framed with sleek black hair, and her lipstick was a trifle too dark. It was after 2, and she was tired and wished they would all go. But it was no small task to rid yourself of some 30 people, particularly when the majority were full of her father's scotch. The elevator man had been up twice to complain about the noise, so she gave him a highball, which is all he is after anyway. And now the sailors. Oh, the hell with it. It's all right, Mildred, really. What are a few sailors, more or less? God, I hope they don't break anything. Would you go back in the kitchen and see about ice, please? I'll see what I can do with your newfound friends. Really, darling, I don't think it's at all necessary. From what I understand, they assimilate themselves very easily. The hostess went toward her sudden guests. They were knotted together in one corner of the drawing room, just staring and not looking very much at home. The best looking of the sextet turned his cap nervously and said, "We didn't know it was any kind of party like this, miss. I mean, you don't want us, do you?" "Of course you're welcome. What on earth would you be doing here if I didn't want you?" The sailor was embarrassed. "That girl, that Mildred and her friend just picked us up in some bar or other, and we didn't have any idea we was coming to no house like this." "How ridiculous, how utterly ridiculous," the hostess said. "You are from the South, aren't you?" He tucked his cap under his arm and looked more at ease. "I'm from Mississippi. Don't suppose you've ever been there, have you, miss?" She looked away toward the window and ran her tongue across her lips. She was tired of this, terribly tired of it. "Oh, yes," she lied. "A beautiful state." He grinned. "You must be mixed up with some other place, miss. There's sure not a lot to catch the eye in Mississippi, except maybe around Natchez way." "Of course, Natchez. I went to school with a girl from Natchez, Elizabeth Kimberly. Do you know her?" "Nope, can't say I do." Suddenly she realized that she and the sailor were alone. All of his mates had wandered over to the piano, where Les was playing Porter. Mildred was right about the assimilation. "Come on," she said. "I'll fix you a drink. They can shift for themselves. My name's Louise, so please don't call me miss." My sister's name's Louise. I'm Jake. Really? Isn't that charming? I mean the coincidence. She smoothed her hair and smiled with her two dark lips. They went into the den, and she knew the sailor was watching the way her dress swung from around her hips. She stooped through the door behind the bar. Well, she said, what will it be? I forgot. We have scotch and rye and rum. How about a nice rum and coke? If you say so, he grinned, sliding his hand along the mirrored bar's surface. You know, I never saw a place like this before. It's something right out of a movie. She whirled ice swiftly around in a glass with a swizzle stick. I'll take you on a 40-cent tour if you like. It's quite large for an apartment, that is. We have a country house that's much, much bigger. That didn't sound right. It was too superfluous. She turned to put the bottle of rum back in its niche. She could see in the mirror that he was staring at her, perhaps through her. How old are you? He asked. She had to think for a minute, really think. She lied so constantly about her age, she sometimes forgot the truth herself. What difference did it make whether he knew her real age or not? So she told him, 16. And never been kissed? She laughed, not at the cliche, but her answer. Raped, you mean? She was facing him and saw that he was shocked, and then amused, and then something else. Oh, for God's sake, don't look at me that way. I'm not a bad girl. He blushed, and she climbed back through the door and took his hand. Come on, I'll show you around. She led him down a long corridor, intermittently lined with mirrors, and showed him room after room. He admired the soft pastel rugs and the smooth blend of modernistic with period furniture. This is my room, she said, holding the door open for him. You mustn't mind the mess. It isn't all mine. Most of the girls have been fixing in here. There was nothing for him to mind. The room was in perfect order. The bed, the tables, the lamp were all white, but the walls and the rug were dark, cold green. Well, Jake, what do you think? Suit me? I never saw anything like it. My sister wouldn't believe me if I told her, but I don't like the walls, if you'll pardon me for saying so. That green, they look so cold. She looked puzzled, and not knowing quite why, she reached out her hand and touched the wall beside her dressing table. You're right. The walls, I mean. They are cold. She looked up at him, and for a moment her face was molded in such an expression he was not quite sure whether she was going to laugh or cry. I didn't mean it that way. Hell, I don't rightly know what I mean. Don't you? Or are we just being euphemistic? It drew a blank, so she sat down on the side of her white bed. Here, she said, sit down and have a cigarette. Whatever happened to your drink? He sat down beside her. I left it out in the bar. It sure seems quiet back here after all that racket in front. How long have you been in the Navy? 8 months. Like it? It isn't much concern whether you like it or not. I've seen a lot of places that I wouldn't otherwise. Why did you enlist then? Oh, I was going to be drafted, and the Navy seemed more to my liking. Is it? Well, I'll tell you. I don't take to this kind of life. I don't like other men bossing me around. Would you? She didn't answer, but put a cigarette in her mouth instead. He held the match for her, and she let her hand brush against his. His hand was trembling, and the light was not very steady. She inhaled and said, You want to kiss me, don't you? She watched him intently and saw the slow red spread over his face. Why don't you? You're not that kind of girl. I'd be scared to kiss a girl like you. Besides, you're only making fun out of me. She laughed and blew the smoke in a cloud toward the ceiling. Stop it. You sound like something out of a gaslight melodrama. What is that kind of girl, anyway? Just an idea. Whether you kiss me or not isn't of the slightest importance. I could explain, but why bother? You'd probably end up thinking I'm a nymphomaniac. I don't even know what that is. Hell, that's what I mean. You're a man, a real man, and I'm so sick of these weak, effeminate boys like Les. I just wanted to know what it would be like, that's all. He bent over her. You're a funny kid, he said, and she was in his arms. He kissed her, and his hand slid down along her shoulder and pressed against her breast. She twisted and gave him a violent shove, and he went sprawling across the cold green rug. She got up and stood over him, and they stared at each other. You dirt, she said. Then she slapped his bewildered face. She opened the door, paused, and straightened her dress, and went back to the party. He sat on the floor for a moment. Then he got up and found his way to the foyer, and then remembered that he had left his cap in the white room, but he didn't care. All he wanted was to get out of here. The hostess looked inside the drawing room and motioned for Mildred to come out. For God's sake, Mildred, get these people out of here. Those sailors. What do they think this is? The USO? What's the matter? Was that guy bothering you? No, he's just a small town moron who's never seen anything like this before, and it's gone to his head in a funny kind of way. It's just one awful bore, and I have a headache. Will you get them out for me, please? Everybody? She nodded, and the hostess turned back down the corridor and went into her mother's room. She lay down on the velvet chaise lounge and stared at the Picasso abstract. She picked up a tiny lace pillow and pushed it against her face as hard as she could. She was going to sleep here tonight, here where the walls were pale rose and warm. That was The Walls Are Cold by Truman Capote from the Complete Stories of Truman Capote. Interesting little story. I find it to be an interesting little story about time and place. Did it say New York City or did I just assume New York City? Not sure. And I can never tell if the sailors are white or if he's white or if she's white. I think she's white. It's an interesting story for me. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you here tomorrow at 3:00 for Frankenstein Tea. That will be my dad's birthday, and I'm digging something up special for him. So I'll see you all then. Thanks for coming. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe. Wear your mask. Wash your hands. Keep your distance. Peace.